race to the last drop. Are you gonna blow your head off? Take good aim and don't forget to duck. Life sucks every Monday and all the way to Sunday, but I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't care how you're doing, what's up or how's it hanging. I'd like to buy this world one last drink. Life sucks all of the time, stick it up your sunshine, and then you'll see the clouds every day. And then you'll see the clouds every day. And then you'll see the clouds every day.
Welcome to the Crazy Life, everyone. My name's Jen. I am your hostess. And with me is Bryan and Hanno. Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
And we have an extra special episode because we get to hear all about Bryan and Hanno's tour of Chicago. Yay, Chicago!
Well, not just that, but Jen and I both got to meet Hanno in person this last week.
That's true.
So
we did.
For
Hanno
the first
took a
time.
tour of Michigan as well as Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jen and I had breakfast one day.
We
in your little
did.
town, which was pretty fun.
My very little town on Lake Erie, and yeah, I'm so glad that you took the time to go and see the lake and see the pier.
Yeah, it was kind of fun. Like, this is neat.
Little tinky little town.
It was great. I love the houses and stuff around there, and just these little cottages, and it definitely has its flavor.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
Catch it in the summer, it's got a real flavor too. So.
Yeah, isn't that aroma?
Well, it still hits your taste buds though.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You should. Thankfully, you weren't here for Mayfly season.
Oh yeah,
lovely.
Yeah, that's good times.
Yeah, they actually have done. I was watching Discovery Channel, and one of the nature's weirdest things or whatever was on. And they actually did a profile of Michigan and mayflies.
Mm.
Because
it's horrible.
You shovel, and I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Ew.
There's so many of them that you have to get out your snow shovel, and shovel them off your walkway or you're sliding because there's so many of them.
Or like a big push broom type of thing. Yeah, it is absolutely awful. Like in the summers, they'll just cover the front of a door. Yeah, it's good times. Good times.
Yeah. The side of my house turns black.
Lovely. And you have cottonwoods.
Yeah.
Great combo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great combo. I just have cottonwoods.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cottonwoods aren't as bad in my part of Michigan.
Yeah.
But in Ohio, they get kind of crazy.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
For sure, yeah.
And, yeah, and they're both very irritating, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you have allergies.
Oh, yeah, seriously. That's why I hate them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, I wouldn't really care. I mean, it stinks if, when it's hot out, you're hot and sweaty, and you just look like you've, grown a layer of fur like you're a Yeti or something. But, you're out cutting the grass or something, and you come in and you're just covered with them. But,
it just clogs up our filters at work. It's so bad.
Yeah. I just hate what it does to my allergies. It's so awful. Yeah.
With us, I have to watch, with the mayfly situation, they stick to you, and you don't know they're there. And so you'll be walking around, and you'll have a mayfly on your back or something. And yeah, so you kind of have to.
Oh, the best part's the sounds that she makes when she finds out
when
that
she realizes there's
they're
one
on
on
her.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have this thing I can't scream, so.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, she eeps.
I remember this issue.
Yeah, she eeps.
That's right.
Yes.
It's really funny.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yes, a series of squeaks and eeps coming out of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not a tiny person, so it's not nearly as cute as when someone little is eking and stuff, but...
It's dang hilarious, though, watching you, like, jump and eep at the same time. Yeah. It's like, you can't even react to what's going on because you're just laughing at that, and then you're like, oh, yeah,
All right, and I'm going to put out a preemptive apology if you hear different things in the background around here. It's because for some reason the cat freight train is decided to go through the house. Yes. They've decided now is the time to play chase and wrestle. So.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's perfect timing. It's all right. It can't be any worse than Toothy Horse was on Salty Language. So, yeah. Yeah.
And I do appreciate the fact that Toothy Horse goes by Toothy Horse instead of her name.
Yes.
For anonymity's sake.
Well, that's her stage name, Yes. Man.
Of course. So, enough randomness. Tell me about Chicago.
Well, before we got to Chicago, we went to Tony's mom's cabin and stayed. And we recapped this a little bit on the new Salty Language episode because Henno was also on that, which was a ton of fun. And, it's not safe for work. It's a much different show. It's very blue. But if you're into that kind of thing, you should go check it out because we had a blast doing that episode.
It's comedy. It's literally like a series of comedy sketches. Like a round table of people just riffing.
That's all it was. It really was. It was just.
It was pretty. So here's, for my part, meeting Jen, seeing your little town, having, breakfast, feeling just comfortable is really amazing. And then, I see some people that I've known for a long time, and then see some other podcasters who I've met before. But then sitting there, I got there way earlier than everyone else did to the cabin, and all of a sudden the car pulls up. And it's like everyone gets out, and I never felt like anything skipped a beat. I went from it was to be that comfortable around a group of people instantly is so unique and so rare. To have that overall feeling, and I think it's demonstrated in the podcast.
Yeah.
Just our comfort level around each other. And I just felt so, it was welcome, and there was none of that weird, like, okay, we've Skyped before, but now it's different in person. No, nothing. It was seamless. I mean, it was great.
And you got to see firsthand, as Tony and I have told people, that we are pretty much the same guys on the show that we are in real life. Like, there's very little difference. We might amp it up a little bit more when we do the show, but it isn't much. It's who we are pretty much all the time. I think
it's really cool, the dichotomy of the two different shows, with the Crazy Life and Salty Language. Mm-hmm. I think it features both sides of who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, really Henno got to see both sides of me this weekend.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. And that was the other part of weekend was amazing, was getting to experience Bryan in full art geek out mode. And just be the sponge absorbing this knowledge was just unbelievable. I honestly, at one point, I told him, I was like, I feel like the luckiest guy in this museum right now. Because it was like I had an expert next to me, like explaining things I never knew before. Yeah. And to top it off, not only was I getting just this education and an appreciation that just filled me, it was in probably the most uncomfortable and worst location that Bryan could ever imagine. If he said, let me fantasize about the worst possible place I could possibly be right now.
Yeah, Jen, I'm not kidding you. This room was a big room. And when we first get into it, I'm like, oh man, this room is full of people. There's so many people in this room. And, each room of this exhibit, now for those who I should, get this right. Yeah, we went to the Art Institute of Chicago right now. It has a Van Gogh exhibit where they're showing off his bedroom paintings. And there's 3 of them that exist. One's owned by the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. One's owned by the Art Institute of Chicago. and the other one is owned by, I can't remember if it's a private collection or if it's somewhere in France that owns it. But anyway,
it was a private collection. Yeah.
Okay, this is the first time in the U.S. the 3 have been shown in one room, or in one place. Mm-hmm. So it's that was a draw on its own, and Van Gogh is my favorite artist, so I absolutely wanted to see this. And we get in this room and it's so busy, and I'm like, and the night before I'm talking with Henno, because it's very relevant to this podcast. I'm talking with Henno and I'm like, oh man, their website's talking about record crowds and, different stuff. And I mean, my anxiety's just building, and I'm like, I really want to see this, but man, it's going to be packed, kind of a thing. And we get up, we go, all this stuff. And there was a good line, but it wasn't horrible when we got there. The line was not bad. And we get in, but it fills up fast. And everyone's taking their time walking through because everyone wants to, really soak up the art. And we happen to, in this room full of people, and I mean, I don't know do you have a guesstimate, like how many people were in that room, Henno?
I mean, like altogether, I think that there was at least 1,000 people in those, because there really was like what? There was a kind of an entry, then there was a middle room, mm-hmm. Then there was another one, and then there was the main room.
Yeah.
And I mean, that main room had to have a couple hundred people in it.
Right. And
easily.
And in each of these rooms.
Each room had a couple hundred people
yeah.
in it. I mean, it was...
Wow.
And at one point, I'm looking, and Henno just darts right toward the front. To get, we could have put our arms out and touched the artwork.
It was just an open, because literally people, you're not moving. I mean, it's like this slow, some people are kind of trudging a line, others are wandering around, kind of slipping by. But there's just these periods where people stop and they take pictures and they're enjoying it. And it was like you had to sit there and be patient.
Yeah.
And you're surrounded. There's no just quickly getting out, and
right.
There was like a gap opened, and it was like, whunk,
Yeah, he takes it, and I just got right behind him. And I mean, like I said, I'm not exaggerating. If we had both put our hands out, we would have been touching the artwork.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And
that close.
We were that close. So you could see all the little textures. You could see some of the brush lines. All those kind of things that I'm a process junkie, so I geek out heavily on this kind of stuff. And I'm telling Henno this stuff as we're slowly walking by. And I don't know if you caught it, Henno. There was a guy behind us that had the phone thing. At one point, when I was talking to you, he pulled the phone down and listened to me.
Listening to you.
And then put the phone back up when I was done talking. Yeah. So wow. I was not just educating you. Apparently, I was giving him an education too.
Because before we even got to the bedroom, we stopped on this one, and it's a still life of a stool, basically a chair. Mm. And I asked Bryan, I said, what is, he said, this is one of my favorites. I said, what about this is your favorite? And it was silence at first. Okay, I can't, all right. And then all of a sudden it started with a deconstruction, almost going back to the beginning of art education. And this is the one element. And then literally taking me through it, how the artist wanted me to see this. Mm-hmm. Wow. And he's taking me through step by step all the elements, and then at the end applies it to today. And these are the techniques that comic book artists use today, or in advertising and whatever. And then we stop for a second, and he goes, that's why this is one of my favorites.
At first I'm like, I don't know. And then I'm like, here's my essay.
Yeah. And I just sat there. I was like, and I stepped up seeing one thing. Yeah. I stepped away with a completely different, version of, I got it. I understood it. It was like, wow.
Yeah.
And that continued.
Yeah. It was so much fun.
Someone's geek is so much fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I actually explained that to him about how when you and I went to Wizard World Chicago the first time, how you just enjoyed watching me run around like a kid in a candy store, Mm-hmm. And, but it was so much fun because I love that kind of stuff. I always have, because obviously I'm an art geek, and you know, actually at one point later in the day, you know, I made a comment about, we said something about crowds was said, and I was like, I would prefer that they're here at the art museum. And Henno kind of turned to look at me, and I'm like, I stand by my statement over the C2E2, you know, comic convention. And, you know, I love pop culture, but I much would prefer larger crowds at an art museum, you know. But it was, I
mean, it was stuffy in there.
That was my only complaint. Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot of people. It was stuffy. You couldn't move. If you suddenly felt panicked, it would have been rough.
Yeah, I will say most people were nice enough that if you were trying to move or get out of there, they generally got out of the way. The only thing you really had to watch for was so many people were taking pictures. You know, at different times, you kind of like, oh, and you like freeze where you're at for a second so you don't step right into a picture. But, but going back to what I was saying, it was so full, and we got right up to the front, and we're talking about this, especially, I can't remember if it was in the bedrooms room or if it was another one, where I turned to Henno at one point, and I'm like, I was like, this room, everything that I thought that was going to happen happened, and I'm fine. Like, this room is packed with people, and I don't deal with crowds well, but it's packed. But I'm so lost in the art that I didn't even notice the hundreds of people behind me until I turned. And then I was like, oh yeah, and there's all these people here, basically. And we were both just like, yes, and and then
when we got to the self-portrait.
Okay, that's right. Yep.
We had gone past all three of the bedroom paintings. And this was tough because it was, there's groups of people in front of each one.
That's the big draw, is the 3 bedroom paintings, like you said.
And so we're going through, and you want to be close, but you also want to step back, because then you get to see the perspective and everything. And so we're trying to wander from one to the other while still keeping an eye on the last one while moving to the next one. And I mean, it's just, there are people everywhere. And finally it was like, all right, let's go see the self-portrait. Well, the self-portrait wasn't quite as crowded. Everyone else was focused in the other direction, and that's when like Bryan turned and looked at me and just said, and like, I don't notice anybody in here.
Yeah,
like this should be the biggest nightmare. And I got chills just because I was already in that. I was in a heightened state of just being, it really was. I mean, there's no more being in the moment than that.
Yeah,
there really is none. And that's what, taking pictures, there's no photograph that I will look out later on my computer that could possibly compare to the moment itself.
Yeah, through that whole exhibit I took, what did I take? 3 pictures or 4, I think. And the funniest picture was the one that Henno took of the Van Gogh self-portrait that he did with, and I'm sure everyone has seen this. It's the one where he has muted his palette with blues. And, Henno took, cause I couldn't get a good picture of it the way the light was hitting it. My phone would not take a picture of it that was worth anything. Henno took 4 pictures of it. He stood in the same spot, but each picture he took was a different picture. Like, each time the picture looked different, and we were both like, that's exactly why you have to come here and see it.
Yeah.
Because seeing it in person, everything was those blues were so vibrant, and seeing it in person is just such a different beast than looking at it online, And, it's why I heavily, encourage people, if you're in the Chicago area and this exhibit's still there, get in there. It's a great museum anyway. But, if you can get in and see this exhibit, especially if you're a Van Gogh fan, go see it, because it was worth the trip. I mean, like I said, it's crowded. It seems to be, from what the, stuff I'm reading online, it seems to be it's crowded a lot because it's, like I said, it's a thing that's never been put together in the U.S. before. So, but it was, awesome. Just awesome.
Incredible win for you.
Yeah.
To be able to, to see the train coming, to know the train's coming, and stand there regardless, and say, no, I'm going to stand here and I'm going to take this because it is worth it to me.
Yeah, and not only that, but I also, it was one of the very, 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 very few times I was living in the moment.
Wow, wonderful.
And I mentioned that to Henno, and it's not something I do. It's so hard for me to do that, and it was so. I swear when I said it to you, Henno, that I got chills as I said it because it was such an awesome thing to recognize. You know, that I was like, man, this is such a huge win for me right now. You know, and I'm seeing something that I'm so excited about, you know. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Yeah, and like even just thinking about it right now gives me chills because it's like, and I got to be there and experience it too. and it was, because I mean, the only time I've heard you talk about anything in comparison to this is the concert you went with Tony.
Yeah.
And I've heard that story before. And, you know, and I also saw when we first got into the city when you weren't comfortable.
Oh yeah.
You know?
The very
we were
first
just
time
walking down the street. And so, and I have a friend, I've shared about it on here before. I have a friend that suffered a major anxiety attack and literally could not go out and check his mail. And I had to go fly up to Washington, state and bring him back to his parents' house in his car because he couldn't drive. And I remember his body language.
Yeah.
And so, I was around Chris for a long time while he was recovering from this. And so I was aware of it. I could tell where it's like Bryan's not comfortable right now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It was like we no more got into, you know, like the car traffic, you know, which I've said before, I'm not comfortable in cars. And there, it's even more amplified because it's a bigger city. Traffic's crazy, but it wasn't even just that. It was when we got out and the crowd, just the walking traffic,
Just on the sidewalk.
Yeah, just the city itself. The overall traffic made me claustrophobic, and I, you know, a couple times through the weekend, I was like, I need out of this. Like, I have to get out of this. And the first one was the first night, and I was just like, I need to whatever, you know, and when we got in somewhere else, you know, Jeannie asked me at one point, she's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm so much better now. Like, I just, you know, we went to a bar, we were going to a bar, and we went into this bar, and it was packed, and it was loud, and I was like, this is the last
a low
thing.
Ceiling.
Yeah. It's like the last thing I need right now. We went into this other bar, it wasn't very busy, it was so much better. I was like, okay, I'm okay in here. There's space, and it's, you know, it was bad.
And then to contrast that with then being in this museum, where it pales in comparison. Now, granted, it's quiet.
True.
Know, that's the one nice thing. But it's so many people. It's like when we finally walked out, you could feel the air change. You know, like suddenly there was enough air to breathe. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, wow, we were really stuffed into a little location. But for me, and it's a rush. It's a high in and of itself. That intensity of being in the moment. It compares to how I've done a few meditation retreats before, and it's like that too. That once you get into your zone, everything that follows gets pulled into that zone, and that's what it was like for the next hour or so as we just wandered through until it was like my cup's full.
Yeah, it really was too, because we went through, after we left that exhibit, we went through the Impressionist wing, and there's a lot of that art that I dig, and I got to see some stuff that I had never seen in person before, which was really cool, you know, and then we went through, the modernist stuff, and, you know, then we went to see, they have a fairly decent selection of, like, Picasso stuff and whatnot in there, and, you know, we got to see some of that, and then we were kind of, like Henno said, we kind of looked at each other and we were like, yeah, I'm full. You know, like it's, like we need to take a break, like if nothing else, and then.
Gotta process this stuff.
Yeah, it's just, you've just taken in so much, and I know a lot of it is, you know, that first part, I think it was almost like, kind of essentially like an overstimulation from that first exhibit. And then taking in more afterward to where you're at a point you're like, I'm done.
And it's a good done.
Yeah,
it's that,
for
that
sure.
Totally, you know, because we went afterwards and And I was just so happy that Tony found this little restaurant, like right underneath the L, like on 2 blocks that you've seen in every single movie ever.
Yeah.
If there's been a car chase in Chicago, it was in these 2 blocks. And we walk into this sandwich shop, and I'm looking at the walls, and it's like, it's history. I mean, this is a family business, been here forever. There's just celebrities. And then when I finally saw what's his name from Man vs. Food, I'm like,
yeah.
I know this place.
Yeah, me too.
I've seen this. And as soon as I bit into the sandwich, it was like, oh yeah, I know this place.
Yeah.
And it was some of the best food. I was like, oh my God.
It was Al's Italian beef.
Yep. Al's Italian beef. And then we ended up back at the hotel. And, you know, like we were saying already, we're just sitting there and we're talking about art and, you know, some art fraud, various things, kind of looking stuff up and just chatting. And it was literally like that, you know, is there anything I'm going to see at this con that can compare to this?
Yeah, it was almost, and we even said at that point, I was like, we could just sit here or for the rest of the time we're in Chicago, and I would still go, this has been an awesome weekend.
Yeah, hands down. Yeah,
you know,
I just said, I just need to see Dev. You know?
Yeah, right. Yeah, because we hadn't met up with Big Dev
yet. One person I wanted to see. And we got to see him later that night.
Yep.
It was like, you know, nobody really wanted to travel all the way to this bar, but it was like Dev was going to be there, so we all went and did it, you know. And you know, we had great chats just sitting in the hotel room so many times. And that's the best part of this, you know, is experiencing each other and experiencing things that we just don't. For myself, I don't get to do this.
Yeah,
you know, and I took it home with me. I took all of it home with me, which you know really ties into the topic too, because that we're going to talk about tonight. Because I've gotten past where this ends up being a negative. Yeah, I have, and it really I didn't really notice it until this last weekend. This last weekend when I came home and I didn't lose it. It was there the whole time. You know, it just stuck with me. And I was like, wow, okay, this is a huge change in a life pattern.
Right.
You know, usually that type of a weekend leads me to our topic.
Right. You know, and I want to point out that I think that like it was such a huge breakthrough for me to realize. Because, and this is kind of interesting, the day before we left on the trip, I was in therapy. And I was telling the therapist about how, you know, I get super anxious about packing and forgetting stuff. And I didn't even bring this part up, but I ended up walking off without so many things.
Right. That's right.
I didn't bring a jacket with me. I didn't bring, and I'm going to the Windy City, you know, and it was cold, but I was honestly fine for most of the time. But I didn't bring that. I didn't bring my Salty Language t-shirt. I forgot my stickers and business cards that I was going to bring so we could hand them out. No, Tony had some, so it wasn't that big a deal. I woke up late the day we were leaving, so I didn't have time to pack the board and the mic so we could record at the cabin. Luckily, Heno had stuff, so he saved the day. Which Tony also, when we were at his house, he's like, oh, I'll run in and get my board, and he forgot it. So we were just, you know, typical Salty Language. You know, and I forgot, like, eye drops, and I forgot so many little things that had I had time to go through my list and all this, but it didn't matter. It just, worst case scenario, I forgot this, all this. But, life still went on. And I was in a room with hundreds and hundreds of people, which is a nightmare generally for me. And it bothered me a little bit time to time, but overall I kept just turning back around and getting lost in the art. And, and I got over it, you know, and that was it. And basically, and that was the thing that my therapist was telling me, like when I was telling her, I was like, I'm always afraid I'm going to forget something. And she's like, what's the worst thing you've ever forgotten on a trip? And I'm like, socks. And she's like, and what happened? I'm like, I bought more. And she was like, so what's the problem? Why do you worry about this? And I was like, I don't know. I just do. And she goes, so what's the worst thing you could forget on this trip? And I'm like, money. And I was like, but even then, it's not that big a deal because, you know, I could have somebody send me money or something, you know, I could work it out. And she's like, so what are you worried about? And again, I walked right into what her and I talked about in therapy, walked right into it face first and walked right through it, you know, and then the thing at the art gallery. So I didn't just have a win for the week. I had 2 wins for the week. Mm-hmm. That I not only faced one thing that I've been like terrified of, but I probably still always will, because I've been packing and traveling with my family for years and years and years. And, you know, I don't know, that anxiety will probably always be there. But at least now I can go, you know, I can look at success on the other side. I can keep remembering that success, you know. Mm-hmm. And same with the art exhibit. When I start worrying about big crowds. So, you know, I didn't take on the C2E2 crowd, though. So that might have been a different beast. But
that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't take anything away from the wins, because
Not at all.
No, you faced your fears and came out on top, which is immensely. I mean, there are no words to be able to describe that.
And on top of all of this, I did it outside of my comfort city. Mm-hmm. I didn't even do this here. I did this hundreds of miles away, you know, exactly. So, and even though I had a great support group around me, you know, I knew everybody who was with me has nothing but, you know, good intentions for me. It's still the idea that still could have gone sideways, because, you know, you can be surrounded by people you know are supportive, but if you don't feel right, you don't feel right, you know.
Yeah. Right. You can still feel alone in full of a room of friends.
But I never did. So,
and there was that for me, this is a memory to bring up. This is it's actually a great focus. You know, I can bring back that moment anytime I want to now.
Yeah.
And that's why, kind of in a way, for me, a lot of not going to that con was kind of self-care.
Yeah.
I just kind of looked at it. It's like, okay, well, what do I want to be left with? And I'm like, if this is it, I'm good. Why risk it? Why throw anything else into it? I don't need to. Yeah. I don't have to. And I used to feel a lot more pressure of that. You know, like, oh, I have to do this. I've came all this way. And I was like, you know what? I've come all this way, and it's enough.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I kind of feel like if we had gone, I think I would have been pushing myself too much.
Yeah.
I think I probably would have noticed the crowds big time there. You know, only because I'd already been, you know, because of pushing myself too much, or not too much, but so much earlier in the day. I think I would have started to notice it later, you know,
but
kind of a
that's
thing.
Even in and of itself, that self-knowledge, the ability to know when to push yourself and when to let yourself be in the moment.
Yeah.
You know, I think that is knowledge that you've not been able to have in the past. You've always gotten caught by the fear and stuff and not even put yourself out there because you didn't even want to test the waters.
Right.
Not only did you jump into the waters, you're like, okay, I've swam, I'm good. I need to come back out of the water. Mm-hmm. You know, you didn't even need someone to kind of tell you to come back out of the water. You just knew, okay, I've had enough. I need to come back out and I need to sit on the beach for a while and just relax.
Yeah. And it wasn't, also it wasn't like when we got back to the hotel room that I was like, hey, you know what? I did blah, blah, blah. I noticed it while we were in the moment.
Which is awesome.
Which I think is really huge, because I've mentioned over the last few weeks on the show how, you know, I have the tendency to go through things and then go, oh yeah, you know, and it's where I'm recognizing, but I'm still not recognizing until I'm through it. So yeah, that's why I said I had a pretty big weekend of wins there. The whole weekend was a win. It was worth it. So anyone who helped me get there or get me through it or whatever, thank you so much, because this may have been one of the best weekends I've had in I don't know how long. I absolutely needed it. So hats off to everyone who helped.
And you, Hannah, what is your win for the week?
Yeah.
I know. We talked about so many different things.
Right.
Yeah, no, laid this out on Angela's Awesome Podcast 6 months ago. You know, I booked this in October, and I said what I wanted to do, and I actually had some anxiety about it just before I left because my girlfriend was going into surgery the day I was leaving.
Right.
And that had a lot of pressure on me, but I trusted her, and it turned out that, well, maybe I should have stayed around that first weekend, but that's okay. You know, we didn't know how bad it was going to be. And being at my parents', you know, around my family and friends and stuff in the Bay Area was a little tough because there is a lot of rush and get to see people and trying to pack in as much as possible. But once I hit, it was just wild and I had this anxiety, like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? But the minute I got to Michigan, it was like, this is why I'm doing this, you know, and seeing that, you know, my old friend who I hadn't seen in a long time, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. And I think it was a big deal for him too, to kind of reconnect, because he's been kind of out of any sort of, you know, talk about being out of your comfort zone. He has not been in familiar territory for, 6 years now, you know, since he left Hawaii. And I could tell, you know, like after I left, he sent me a couple text messages that were just, you know, said just thank you, you know, and that made it worth it for me. It made every bit of the trip worth it, you know, and then to end it with this was just, you know, I could not have imagined it. And so this just reminds me, is like, have faith, you know, trust in my instincts. You know, I had an intuition that this was the thing I needed to do, and it was perfect. You know, and I really felt this. It was even great, like, you know, with Clint watching. I mean, he was so into the con, and it was so cool. You know, he was planned out, ready. He spent 2 full days there, and even he too was just like, you know, I think I'm done.
Yeah.
You know, he's like I've really, really gotten a lot out of this, and I don't think I should push myself. He did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and
and he's been on this show, and you know, he's a guy who has issues, you know, with stuff too. So it's, you know, he put himself out there and pushed, you know, and it's really good for you to do that. You know, everyone who's listening, it's like you have to push yourself a little bit sometimes. You also have to know where too far is, but you've got to push yourself sometimes. Because
test your limits.
Well, I like with me, I think by pushing myself, I kind of see where I've grown. Like you see what you've learned, and you see where what you need to work on. You know, like I feel like right now, if I had a therapy appointment tomorrow, I'd be ready to go in there and say, here's what I think I used properly, and here's where I think I still need to work on, you know? And I think that's a huge thing, you know?
One of the things, like, there was at one point, there was 11 of us, I think, you know, walking to a bar.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have people walk at different paces. Everyone has their own speed, and, you know, no one's trying to be mean or rude to anybody else. They're just, everyone's doing their thing. Everyone's hyped up. You know, we're all hyped up, having a good time. And, you know, and Clint was bringing up the rear, moving at his pace.
Yep.
And nothing wrong with that. And, you know, everyone was aware of it and said, okay, you know, we stick together, this kind of thing. But what I admired the most was the next night we were going out to somewhere. Clint said, hey, I'm going to take off. He recognized that he's a slower guy. He's going to go on his own through the streets of Chicago to the location we're going, and then we'll catch up with him. Yeah. And I found that to be so admirable. That's someone that's comfortable in his skin enough to know that, you know, I can be part of this, and I can be part of this in my own way.
Yeah.
And he was not only thinking of himself, he was thinking of everybody else too. And I really admired it. And to me, I love those experiences. I love anyone that takes the challenge and, you know, meets it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That's fabulous. I mean, I'm just, you know, I hate to say, you know, proud, because that's kind of condescending, and I don't mean it by any stretch of the imagination that way, but it is. I mean, it's almost like
that's what it is.
Yeah, I'm so proud that you guys have had these experiences and have, you know, pushed yourselves to these enlightenments and stuff. It's just, it's very overwhelming, and just listening to it. So I'm sure the audience is getting the same thing out of it than I am, which it's amazing. It's an amazing thing that what people can do when they really are fighting for themselves and fighting for what they want in life.
Mm-hmm.
It's awesome.
Because I have to take Bryan's word for it when he tells me about I couldn't get up today, right? I can't experience that.
Yeah.
I'll never be able to experience that. I can take his word for it and say this, and that makes the time that you go out of your comfort zone and you're willing to go out and live life. It just makes it even sweeter, to be part of it, because it is so, I have done trips like this with tons of people that have no problems. They have no hangups, and sometimes I wonder, I think back on those, they didn't affect me like this did. I don't have the memories like I do this trip. There's just something about it. At one point, I just remember kind of looking around at all of us hanging out in our little hotel room. And I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. There's a group of people I've never met before. And I feel like I'm amongst some of honestly, the closest friends.
Yeah, it's
really
like Tony even said that, he's like, cause we've been doing Salty Language. We're inching very close to 5 years now. And, he's like, man, it's so amazing how, basically everyone we met this weekend is because of doing podcasting, and right. I'm like, I know, right? It's like, it is amazing that we, just because we did that, it's led to this other thing. And it isn't just oh, hey, you podcast too, cool. And we, and then we, whatever. It's like, these are people that we're making like connections with, like, really
real friendships.
Yeah, like real friendships with, like, in even some of the ones I haven't met yet, I still feel like we're friends, and it's so amazing how this has happened. It's so crazy. And then, like Heno said, man, as soon as we all got out of that car at the cabin, there was no like, oh, hey, this is Heno. It was just boom and go,
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, hey, Heno's here too. Cool. Let's all just go. Just like he was another member of the group. Yeah. There was no uneasiness. Even like T had T's never talked to him, never met him before, nothing. And boom, right from, you know what I mean? It was just right there, and it was awesome. It was just so awesome. So.
Well, that's completely wonderful.
Yeah.
And what we're going to talk about today is after the fact, after these amazing experiences, after we've pushed ourselves, after we've had these wonderful enlightenments in these great moments, there's always the aftershock. And that's the tough part. A very common term for it is called an emotional hangover. And not unlike, you folks have probably heard us talk about them before, and not unlike the namesake, the hangover, caused by alcohol, there is a lot of side effects that come with pushing yourself and having these emotional highs, because there is the side effect of the emotional low. Something that I pushed myself this weekend for is Supercross is very important to my fiance. And we ended up going to Ford Field to see the Supercross event this Saturday. Mm. And it is filled with a lot of people and a lot of men who are very testosterone driven, bikes and stuff and all that good stuff, which I'm not trying to attack men at all, because I think you guys are fabulous. I love men. But when men have a tendency to get together, there is a group mentality that kind of forms, and they feed off of each other, and there can be more aggression than a mixed crowd of men and women. So that scares me, and crowds scare me, in large groups of very aggressive crowds scare me. So I had a lot of anxiety before the fact,
Mm-hmm.
but the day of, during the event, I was perfectly fine.
Yeah. So very similar to what I was going through. Yeah.
Yep, on a much smaller scale because it wasn't a huge event for me. It was like normal things that normally would happen didn't happen. So it was really awesome to have that win, but you still have that aftershock. So the emotional hangover, an article that Bryan found, really speaks a lot to this type of emotional hangover,
mm-hmm.
which is...
Well, real quick, let me, of the people that we went to Chicago with, cause some of us are in, a kick group, like the Salty
Mm-hmm.
Language, we have a kick group. And so we, kind of talking in there. And a few of us have kind of, like, I've seen people posting about, like, well, back to the grind, that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what the emotional hangover part of it that the way I've experienced it is. Now, for me, it's even a little different from that because what happens is most days I don't go out a whole lot. I don't interact with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. This whole 4 days of us going out and stuff, it was almost constant interaction. There were a lot of people around me the whole time. So now I go back to that quiet room, essentially, from the other. So there's a bit of almost like a slingshot effect, from overexposure to underexposure kind of a thing. And there's not like a middle ground of it. And, but the other part of it is that when I'm around all those people, I enjoyed everybody so much. Plus there was the exhibit and all this other stuff that you kind of are, you're riding a high. And then when you come back home, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I got to fill out healthcare paperwork today and I got to edit my podcast and I got to this. And, you get back into that stuff that you're just kind of like, this isn't as exciting and fun as these other items were, So and it's kind of that, you're like, oh, okay. Now, for me, what I have to watch is that I don't essentially in that slingshotting, I have to be careful that I don't slingshot into kind of a depressive cycle because it's easy to do because I just had a high, which I don't get very often. So it's really easy for the floor to kind of fall out because I don't normally have a middle ground,
Well, and that's exactly it. According to the article on liveyourlegend.net, some of the symptoms are you feel empty and alone, you crave attention, feel anxious, hurried, and stressed, lose your motivation to be healthy, experience a feeling of excitement quickly replaced by a feeling of loss. So those are the symptoms that they talk about. And the things that you want to look back on. So, whether you have mental illness or not, everyone can experience these. And if you look back on situations where you've experienced extreme highs, then think about what happens right after those extreme highs. You can start making the correlation between the two, and you can start recognizing them.
It doesn't even necessarily have to be a big high, though. It could just be you went on vacation and then tomorrow you have to go back to work. Like, even if the vacation is just really, even if it's you stayed at home for a week, you know what I mean? Like, and you're going back to work tomorrow, there's still that mindset of essentially that, and you just kind of go into a lot of that kind of an effect.
Mm. And it talks about the different steps. So unfortunately, you can't drink a Bloody Mary. Hair of the dog is not the answer, as much as it seems like it should be.
I disagree. Henno, let's go back to Chicago.
But the first thing is you want to recognize it. So knowing and understanding why is always half the battle. So you want to recognize the fact. So not unlike what you've done, Bryan, which is you knew what was coming up. You knew that the emotional hangover was going to hit.
Mm-hmm.
So you mitigated as much as you could, against the downfalls that happen.
Right, including going to therapy the day before I left because I wanted to try to put myself in a position beforehand so that I would, have tools to deal with it ahead of it. Because I believe last week, I don't remember if I said it on the show or if it was just when you and I were talking, Jen, that I was like, watch, next week I'm probably going to be like, I'm going to slingshot the other way.
Yes.
Because I just figured this was going to happen.
Exactly. And, and I do the same thing, and I've talked about it on the show, about even coming up with my pending nuptials. I know I'm going to have some emotional hangovers, and I'm just going to have to really make sure that I'm on point and make sure I use my tools, my people around me, and my tools that I have to get through them. Now, another one is to try to understand it. So you want to write down what happened over the past few days, what was so exciting and memorable, so that you can reflect back on that, see if there's anything in there that you can continue. And, if it's not something that's continuable, you can at least have records of it and refer back to it as, this really great high moment. Get grateful and dive into an emotional flood. So be grateful for your experiences. Try to revel in the positiveness of the whole thing. Move and breathe. Breathe, people. Breathe, 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 breathe.
I feel like we may have mentioned that once before.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe? Breathing?
Yeah.
What? That wiggle your toes. Wiggle your toes and breathe. It's always a good thing. So, eat foods that serve you. So,
and this one's more important than probably people will give it credit for.
I agree with you.
Because it's easy to start feeling a little bit down and emotionally eat because you're feeling down, and you go into the comfort foods, which can be sometimes really terrible. And then, you can kind of feed into another cycle that way. So, yeah.
And I know you have done a lot of reading and stuff on sugars, haven't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
yes.
and how sugars can cause, I'm sure most, emotional hangovers, doing the whole sugar and eating a ton of sugar is going to make you feel good momentarily, but I can imagine it's going to destroy you after the fact.
Yeah, and that's the thing that if we think about where we get these highs, they're usually at events and at places where we've been able to, kind of stretch out of our usual eating habits, drinking habits, whatever it is. So getting home and continuing that typically doesn't help.
Right.
Because my first thing when I read this was like, oh, pint of ice cream. It's like,
nope.
Right.
No, that's not it.
Right.
That's not it. No, go home and make yourself a nice salad.
Yeah. Don't eat a plate full of brownies.
Yeah. Drink some water because you've probably been drinking something else all weekend too.
I did a fine job of drinking water this weekend. I'm probably one of the few who did.
Yes, drink your water.
Yeah.
Okay, ease back into it. This is a huge one. When feeling drained, alone, and down and out from one of these hangovers, the immediate thought is to get around more people. You're craving stimulation, so this is natural. Just like an alcoholic will tell you the quickest way to feel better after too many drinks is to drink a little more. You can only imagine how slippery that slope can be. This only prolongs the inevitable. If you overstimulated for a few days and take your medicine, be by yourself and take time to understand your emotions.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, realistically, if I came off that trip to Chicago and immediately went into something, like if I was doing some social event Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I would be such a mess by the end of the week. I really would need at least, I came home Sunday night and, I stayed up for a little bit and then I was like, man, it's caught me, the weekend has kind of and I went and I just laid in bed. I turned the TV on, just something mindless. And I was like, you know what? If I fall asleep, I'm just going to fall asleep. And I was like, oh, I should work on the podcast. And I was like, nope, it's just not going to happen tonight. And that's exactly what happened. I fell asleep probably around 9:00, and I woke up feeling, decent on Monday. And I actually think that's why, as far as the emotional hangover of this trip is gone, I don't think it's been as bad as it normally is for me. Because again, I saw it coming. I tried to prevent it a little bit with therapy and whatnot. And I just listened to my body,
Mm-hmm. And you were saying, Hannah, that this was a better one for you as well, hasn't it been?
Yeah, the last thing that she talks about is I want to go make dinner plans with some people, but instead go have a nice meal alone and read a book. And that hit me so hard, because I used to, when I would have these getaway weekends with huge groups of people, especially with my Estonian ski trip I used to usually go on every March, and I've done this for my entire life. It's a group of people that I run into every year. It's a great party. It's a wonderful time, and I have all of these feelings of just this. It's an honest to goodness euphoria. And I would get home and I would feel like I would almost be bursting into tears with just the emptiness and the feeling of loss. And like, why can't I have this all the time? Yeah. And I remember feeling that way going back to being, when I was a kid, and I would have it, I couldn't adjust. I just could not. I mean, I always felt like that there was something, like I needed to be back there. I wanted it. And where I really noticed it this last weekend is I got home. I was looking forward to getting home. It didn't take away from any of the feelings. I took that gratitude with me. It was amazing when I got onto the train, and I'm just realizing, and I put a post on Facebook about this, how, I realized I'm around a bunch of people that are, different size, shapes, colors, creeds, whatever it was, just people going on their day, speaking languages I don't recognize. And I just saw how beautiful this is, how amazing this is. This is life. This is reality. It's like, yeah, bad thing. I mean, I could have gotten robbed an hour later on that train. Who knows? I don't know, but it didn't happen that day. And this guy came up and hustled me for a couple of bucks for coffee, and it just made me laugh, because I was like, he can make $100 a day doing this for all I know. But I had a great conversation with him, and I gave him some money, and I walked away, looking forward to getting home. And when I got in the house, I mean, I had bills to pay. It's like payday had happened and all the bills had happened while I was gone. I had the pile of, I'd been gone, 10 days. I had the pile of mail to go through, and I just sat down and started doing it. And just with this idea of have something to eat. I didn't read a book, but I just did my thing. I didn't dread it. And that was new for me. I wasn't wistfully wishing to go back, like I used to feel all the time.
Yeah.
And feeling like when you wake up, it's like when you have the party at your house and the last person walks out the door and you stop and you look around and you're just like, whew, now what?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I used to feel all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't feel it right now. And all I can say is it's because over the last, especially over the last 5 years, is learning who I am, learning to be happy with myself, learning to be okay with me, and to accept my life. I love my life. I looked forward to coming back. This augmented my life. And that's what was different. And it's really remarkable, because I'm used to having that feeling of shutting the door and turning around and just going, ooh, okay. Like everyone's gone.
Yeah.
I'm alone.
Like I actually had a really similar thing. Like I actually found it kind of weird yesterday that I was thinking about the trip a little bit, and I was like, what's weird is, as much as I loved it, I had a blast, had a great time with everybody, and I'm like, I'm not pining to go back right now. Now maybe in 6 months I'll be kind of, not so much to go back, but to go next time.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm not like, man, I wish we were still I was like, and again, it kind of clicked in my head. It's like, my head's not letting me go backwards. on this. Like, I'm just like taking taking stuff with me, but I'm going the other way. Like, I'm just like, that was awesome. I'm glad I had it. But the way I'm going to appreciate that is by this other stuff happening. Like living the rest of my life is going to make me appreciate that, happening. And if it happens again next year, awesome. If it doesn't, well, that, it's not in the cards. But I just haven't found myself like at the same thing. And that doesn't mean any less to me, and if anyone listening, it shouldn't mean that I any less to them either, like I'm not putting anyone down, nothing like that at all. It's just that I'm just not, and like you said, it's like I'm just okay with that. It's really a weird kind of feeling because I've been on vacations so many times to where as soon as I get home, I'm like, oh, I wish I was still there for like the next week. Or however long. You're like, at least until you kind of get back into your rut, and then you're like,
yeah, exactly.
And then you're just used to it again. But, until you get back to that. And I almost immediately, I was like, that was awesome. And maybe it's because I was kind of like, there was a lot of overexposure to me there, with the traffic and different stuff. Like, I don't think I could have taken 3 more days because I think the traffic and stuff was driving me crazy enough that, 3 more days, who knows? But
sure.
Well, that's
great.
When Portland, the same thing happened after Portland as a lot of people, when we were over at Rose City Comic-Con, a lot of people had those feelings of a little bit of regret, or, like, oh, I wish I'd done this more. I wish I'd spent more time with so-and-so or whatever. We had over 20 people together at one point. People. I mean, it'll probably never happen again.
Yeah. Even with the group we had at 10 to 12, depending on how many at one point, there were a couple times that I'm like, man, I wish the group was a little smaller so I could talk to everyone. Like, I didn't get a chance to talk to Teddy a whole lot. And I'd like a little more chance to talk with him or, like that. So, but it's just, you just have to know that with a big group, you're just not going to be able to talk to everybody,
Yeah, exactly. And people really, I could sense, and I could, we were obviously all just messaging each other and whatever. And there was a sense of loss for some people. And I didn't have that. And, once again, it kind of goes to, this was a learning experience for me. Like, I'm like, wow, why didn't I why didn't I have this? What was it that was different? And I can point to specific things, that I had real old time friend connections and things like that. I had other purposes for being in the city and everything like that. But ultimately, what it boiled down to is I knew I didn't just walk in the door and then walk back out of it and shut it. I mean, that door, it was open. And what did I do? I went and saw it. Everything worked out that I could go see Grant and Jason from 7 Days a Geek. They had flown out from Michigan to come to Portland. I barely had time to even hang out with them at all. I mean, one night at a bar. But I got to go up there to their house and podcast with them, have dinner beforehand, spend some time with them, see their lives a little bit. Mm-hmm. And it was just a reminder that Portland was just the beginning.
Right.
It was just an open door, and that this experience can continue. I think, unfortunately, for a lot of us, when, we have these vacations only every once in a while, we have this time away every once in a while. And so we cling to it so tightly. And I'm just like, no, this is important to me. I want to make this a part of my life, and I'm going to do what I can to do this. Because it's what I took back home with me and to work with me this week is priceless. It's absolutely priceless.
Absolutely. You're right. Yep.
And I think that's really important. Something to really think about is when you're dealing with these emotional hangovers is what can you take with you from it? Mm-hmm. What can you move with, and what can be repeatable?
Yeah. And also, why are you having a hangover? That was the key thing for me is like, okay, if I get home and I'm not happy and wish I was back there, well, maybe this is a good opportunity to look at my home.
Yeah.
My space, where I work, what is my situation? Because these are two extremes that it takes two to tango in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
We all know how much fun vacation is, but to have that low when you get back home, that has to have some reasons behind it too. We can work on both sides. This article talked about, it's like, be conscious next time. Yeah. Know that this is a normal thing. Know your limitations. Know what you can do. So when you go on vacation, you set yourself off for the best return. Like Bryan said, go to therapy, did therapy first, did what you can to set yourself up. But then also, if you're just running away from something, it's going to happen every time.
Right. And if you're just running away from something, it's going to be there when you get back.
Exactly.
Like if you're taking a vacation because bills are too ridiculous for you, like you said, you were gone 10 days. Guess what was waiting for you? They didn't go, oh, hey, you took 10 days off. Okay, we'll see you, later.
The power bill doesn't take a vacation.
No.
Unfortunately.
Right.
Well, definitely use those tools that you have around and you surround yourself with to, examining your life as it is, examining your life as you want it to be, and finding the gap between. How do you navigate the gap between? It's definitely very important. Very important aspects to the whole process. The whole key is to make sure that you're introspective about it. You recognize what you're going through. You recognize what it is, which is just an emotional boomerang, and that it's temporary.
Right.
Which is a huge thing. Make sure you understand that it's temporary. Just like hangovers are temporary. This is a temporary state too.
It's also why I mentioned to people, if you can, in your planning of like a vacation and whatnot, plan to get home have a day between your vacation and going back to work. Make one day your hangover day. And it may sound silly, but I'm telling you,
it's so true.
When people can do that, they tend to ease into Monday so much easier than when they come home Sunday and have to go right back to work. Because you picture jet lag, but you have to go to work the next day. It's all some sort of a hangover. You have to adjust to. Even with us, we went from Chicago to Michigan. There's an hour time difference there, and it's funny because you wouldn't think you would notice that, but man, do you notice that? Like even on the car ride home, we're coming back, and it's like, man, this trip feels like forever, and it's not a long car ride. I mean, it is, but it's not. It's, what is it, 5 hours or something like that? It's not horrible, but it felt like so much longer, because it's the ride home. It always feels like longer, and, like for Tony and Jeannie, they had to go back to work Monday. So, Monday's probably a good kick in the pants because, that's just how it worked out. But if you can plan one extra day in there, you do so. It'll make life a lot easier. Yeah,
I do that when I come back from I've come back from Hawaii the last couple of years. Yeah. I purposely left a whole day. And in some cases it's almost 2 days. It ends up being like a day and a half because you get the kind of the travel and then but having that, being able to kind of get home and just kind of and then you wake up the next day and you're like, oh, awesome, I have a whole day.
Yes, right?
I don't have to go to work today. Okay, this is great. I can get back into the swing of things.
Right? It's like that bridge between the two because it's not quite a vacation day, but it kind of is. But yet you're still going to probably, like you, when you mentioned the bills, if you have that day, maybe you go, well, I should probably take care of the bills today. Or, you kind of get back into your routine. And, like I said, it kind of, I've just seen so many people when they do that, it just seems to be an easier transition, And
it was kind of funny that you say that. It's like, I like my routine.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned to like it. I don't like it because I'm sadistic or I love paying bills.
Right.
I've learned to like my routine.
Yeah.
I've learned to like my space. I've learned to like these things.
Yeah.
And it goes a long way. I can't imagine going back to just begrudging my life.
Yeah.
And I did. I used to begrudge various aspects of it. And that's my choice. That's up to me how I want to take it.
Yeah. It really is, because, if you don't like your life, look at what you can change in it and make changes. And if you can't make changes, then just, you can always make some change, if nothing else, just your framing.
Just your perspective.
Yeah. It's hard to change. I can speak firsthand on that. It's very difficult to change, but it's in, like, Henno and I talked about this a little bit over the weekend, that, or some other point, I don't remember when it was. We've talked it various times, but anyway, about how, no, you know what?
4 a.m.
That's when it was. That's when it was.
Yep.
Cause we were at the cabin, but we were talking about how, like, someone will say something to him now about how he is. And it's like, yeah, but you don't see, I've put in all this work to become this me, And it's like, I see the way he frames stuff now, and in my head, that's the goal, is to get to where I can frame stuff better. And, but I'm not one who goes, oh, look at this guy, he's got it. I understand he's put in a lot of work to do it, and I see the work that's ahead of me. And, that's the change I'm trying to make. I'm not happy with how I frame things in my life, because I know it starts there. If I can change my framing, it opens doors big time, because then I'll stop looking at the negatives. I'll start seeing what is actually there, instead of, like, this weekend, realizing that I'm going, wow, I was dreading this and this and this. And I walked right into it, and I was like, okay, and just kept walking. So,
and that's going to stay with you for hopefully forever.
Yeah.
Those
if nothing else,
experiences.
If nothing else, it helps. It's like sports psychologists will always tell you to picture yourself doing something so that you can continue having success. Well, you actually have to have done it once in order to picture yourself doing it once, or doing it again. And that's what it is.
Yep. I run into that a lot when people are struggling with recovery because they don't think they can do it. They're sober for a little bit, and here they have, dad's funeral, and they pick up a drink.
Oh, right.
And then the next time, something else happens, another life thing happens, and they pick up a drink. And there's nothing I can do except say, because my own experience was, there was something that I said I didn't think I could get through without taking a drink, and I got through it.
Yeah.
And once I've gone through that dark tunnel and emerged on the other side, it's like, all you got to do is once.
Yep.
One time.
Now
and
you
then
have
remember,
proof. Yep.
I did this.
Yep.
I can do this again. It's not saying it's going to be easy again. Not saying the next time it's going to be like, oh, piece of cake. I got this.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be just as hard, but at least you'll have some faith, or you should. You did it once.
Yeah, exactly.
You can do it again. And I think that's a huge point, is that that's why these are victories, is because it's a notch on the post of win.
Yes, it is.
It truly is, though. Like I said, because now if I start doing the negative thoughts, I can go, wait, I did this. Like, I've done this, so who knows? Maybe next time I walk in and I've dreaded the big crowds and I walk in and go, nope. Maybe later in that day, I would have walked in and to the C2E2 and just been like, nope, and turned around and walked right back out. Maybe not, who knows? It's, it could have been in the same day. I could have faced it twice and one was okay and the other wasn't. That's, that can happen. So,
but that's not the focus.
Right.
The focus is on the win.
Exactly.
You don't focus on what you didn't do.
You don't focus on
what you did.
Right. You don't focus on the woulds and coulds and shoulds and all that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, the other side of the emotional hangover, Henno kind of brought up in our chat this week. Do you want to go into that a little bit, Henno?
Sure. Yeah. I walked into the office on Tuesday, and there was this chatter going about a meeting at 9:30. And I'm like, I haven't heard anything about it. One of our employees had been texted. And so sure enough, eventually on the radio, we get this, and we don't do meetings at 9:30 unless it's like, we have to get new health care or, something.
Right. Something big.
So we sat around this table, and the health club that's on our property, the general manager is one of our board members for the HOA. And so I work for a homeowners association, and even though I have a general manager, there's 8 or 9 employees, I think, total. And we have a general manager who has to kind of take care, and we have a bookkeeper, and they take care of kind of HR stuff. There, you do end up to a point where you need to go to a kind of a higher authority. And that usually ends up being the board. Well, the board they're retired people. They're people that aren't there full time. This is a vacation home or whatever it is. And usually the board president ends up being someone that lives there. Well, retired guy doesn't want to listen to employee issues. And so Derek, the GM from the health club, had sat down with us and said, we have hired an outside HR person to come in and basically do an investigation. But it was pretty much just to do an interview. There was and I don't know what it was, and I didn't ask, something happened that required an outside authority. Because usually in a big company, your HR person should be a person you can go to talk to and know that there's going to be no retaliation, that, it's going to be confidential, that kind of a thing. And so that was this idea. And we were encouraged that this was our opportunity to talk about anything we want. And that it would be the only people that would hear would be Derek was going to hear about it because he was part of this process, and our board president. And it sounds like they're making some decisions, but no other employee will hear. And this woman's credentials were impeccable. It's like, holy cow, you've got experience, education, all this stuff. So, I have done for many years, and this was so funny. I explained this to her. I said, there's the way I'd like things to be. There's the way I think things should be. And then there's the way that they are.
Right.
And I have learned, and not easily, and it's taken a lot of bumps in the road and hiccups and foot and mouth and the rest of the stuff and regret, that, it's pick and choose your battles. I go through my little things, it's like, does it need to be said? Does it need to be said right now? And does it need to be said right now by me?
Yes.
And if I say no to any of those, even slightly, then I don't say it. And what was funny is the lady was like, wow, I've never heard that, and I need to write that down. This whole idea of
anyone listening should write that down. If you were, because that
words,
is, those are so important, because so many people are similar to me and will just spout everything off to their boss, and that's how you end up in a rut at work.
Yeah, or you're just the next person that's coming in complaining, or you're just the one on top, whatever it is. And what I did is when something was relevant, then I try to bring it up. I try not to bring up ancillary stuff. I try not to bring up the past. A month ago, I try not to keep lists.
Right.
Deal with the issue at hand. And so basically, every single time that I have chosen not to say something, now is my opportunity. This was the right time. And evidently, she expected me. I had one of the largest blocks of time set aside. And she had, there was a very nice thing that she said. She said, you are held in high regard by your fellow employees. And I was like, wow, thank you. And I try to achieve that. I try to, if somebody tells me something in confidence, it's in confidence. And I try not to gossip, and I try to see how I can add to the stream. These are all things I've learned, because who do we spend more time with than anybody else in our lives? Our coworkers.
Yeah.
When you really look at the hours, and so I've just made it, I'd rather have it be smooth than rough. But with all that said, I got to unload a lot of stuff, and it's not all nice, and it didn't feel good. As much as this was in confidence, I was airing other people's dirty laundry.
Right.
And it's just, the hard part about it is it's the truth. It's the truth.
Yeah.
And it felt rotten afterwards.
Yeah.
I was just, I was sick.
Isn't it amazing how I think the common thought is that it'll feel cathartic to get all of that off of you, and a lot of times it doesn't. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was not like a therapy session at all. I actually needed a therapy session afterwards.
Right. Yeah.
Fortunately, I ran into somebody that I can download to, and after about a few minutes of downloading, I was like, "Oh, thanks, Rick. I needed that." You know, I got done and went and had lunch.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting around the people that I have just been talking about. Not all negative, but you know, I've gone out of my way to not be a gossip.
Yeah.
You know, I talk about my experiences. You know, we talk about our experience. You know, over the weekend, Brian and I talk about our experiences with other people that we interact with. I don't consider that gossip. I'm just talking about what I experience in life, and you know, exchange that with somebody else. It's something else to go, did you hear what so-and-so did? You know, that's what I'm talking about.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's different to, you know, to say, you know, I had this experience. Anyhow.
Yeah. I've had to go through a couple things like this too, where like the places I worked, like a new manager would come in and they basically were like, well, I want you to tell me about everybody basically. And I'm like, man, and they want the best and worst of everybody. And I'm like, I don't want to do this, but it's kind of what I have to do. And it's the same idea. I feel like crap afterwards because basically I've sold out people, but they're going to find this out anyway. And but it's the same thing. I'm not going to tell them gossip. Yeah. I'm just going to basically tell them the same thing that's going to be in an employee review kind of stuff. But it still doesn't make me feel good that I'm telling them this stuff, you know?
It doesn't. And I tried to avoid hearsay, but there's always a lot of hearsay.
Always.
There's always a lot, you know, and I tried to keep it out and just stick it to my experiences. And I mean, this one was an absolute professional, and there was, you know, she wanted this because it turns out I was also corroborating other people's stories. And a couple times it was really important, and I could tell. Like where she was like, can you remember what was said? And I'm like, I'll try. And I actually emailed later. Wow. But the weird thing about it is it felt no different than a conflict experience. Yeah. I felt the same unease afterwards as you do when you get into a fight with somebody, when you start when you say the wrong things, when you have these moments of tension, when you know, all these, when you have, you know, all of those little things that usually happen in life that are known to be negative. This isn't supposed to be negative, but it still felt the same. And I had this absolute emotional hangover. I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, it was just like, oh.
Emotional hangovers don't always have to come from positive.
Yeah, exactly.
Emotions.
Yeah. They can definitely come from this kind of thing too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when you brought this up, I was like, well, you know, you brought it up already. Mm-hmm. And then I experienced this and I was like, huh, interesting. Nice choice, Brian.
Funny how that works, isn't it? Because I was coming at it from the post-Chicago thing. Yeah. And when you mentioned that, and I was like, oh man, this is perfect, because I had kind of thought of that, but I was like, I don't know if it's harder to find like articles, advice, whatever, based on what you were talking about. You know, you don't see as much stuff online for that as kind of like a conflict resolution or type thing. Yep.
And that's what it usually is.
Yeah. And there should be, because those emotional hangovers I think those are harder to deal with. The other ones usually generally you need like a day or two and you're okay, you know. But even then, you know, some people aren't. Some people, they live too much behind them, and they, you know, they obsess on the past, and, you know, it's like the one person, you know, that took a vacation and they just keep talking about it for like 20 years, you know, and you're like, we get it. You had a good time, but can we move on? You know, with this, it's a whole different story because you personally feel bad, and, you know, resolving that is a whole different story.
Yeah. It's second guessing. It's shame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so similar to, like, you know, going through a situation, you know, where you get home and go, oh man, I should have said something different. I should have this. And like you're saying,
You relive the whole thing, and
that's a bad spiral to go down. Yeah.
But the tips that we talked about earlier today, I think, are very applicable in this situation, even as well. You know, you want to make sure that you take the time to process through it, but don't dwell. You know, make sure that you spend plenty of time alone, but know that you do have, you know, certain key people that you can reach out to if need be. But definitely spend your time processing it, and don't necessarily rush out and to try to continue it. Like you said, Hanno, you talked to a friend for a couple minutes, you got through it, you know, what you needed to get out, but you didn't dwell and you didn't make it last longer by telling every single person you ran into what's going on.
Rehashing it. Sure. And that's what we do, especially like when we have a conflict, like a breakup. And it could be anything, friendships. It could be you start calling everybody and talking, and you're telling them the same story over and over again.
Yep.
And that's when it reminds me of something that my counselor had told me is like, if you're in one of those positions and you're feeling that need to call people and to vent or whatever it is call them, and before you start just, verbally vomiting on them, is to actually ask if they're available.
That's fair. Yeah.
Right.
That's
ask
good.
if they're, which I was like, oh yeah, that's probably a good thing. Ask if they're available to talk.
Yeah.
And then give yourself a time limit and tell them to cut, and I want you to cut me off after so much time.
Yeah.
And I sat there looking at this counselor like she was like, like she just sprouted a second head.
Yeah.
Like this sounds, but afterwards I thought about it. I'm like, you know what? That's only fair. And I call someone and say, hey, I need to download for a little while. Are you available?
Yeah.
Yes or no? Yes. Okay. I want to keep this to about 5 minutes. And if at 3 minutes, or if I start repeating myself, please interrupt me.
Right, because that is something a lot of people will do, is that they'll say stuff and they get to a certain point where really all they're doing is
repeating themselves.
It's the same thing.
Cycling it. Yeah.
But you remember, Jen, I used to do the same thing with Jen. Like when she went through a rough patch at work, she would come home from work and I'd realized that after a while she would start obsessing on it. So I was like, you have half an hour. After and I was like, and I remember telling someone else that, and they're like, wow, what a jerk. And I was like, no, I'm doing that for her own good and my own good, because otherwise I start obsessing on it, because I'll start going, it's like in my head, I'm like, well, how can I, I'm trying to figure out how to solve or make this better or whatever. But for her, it was like she would go into a cycle. And that's the way most people do, is you start beating yourself up, second guessing. I should have said this. I should have done, and at some point you have to stop. If you don't, it becomes, you won't stop that spiral, and it never ends well. You never solve the problem. You never make it better. I've never met a person who went through that spiral and at the end of it was like, you know what? This is what I'm doing tomorrow. And they go in and all of a sudden everything is 100% better. They flip the problem around and it's perfect.
You can't change the past.
No, it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. No matter how you talk about it, you can't change it.
Yeah, so why beat yourself up?
Well, you got to quit wishing for a better yesterday.
Yeah, really, you do.
Exactly.
The first tip that they had about, are you too emotionally attached to the outcome of the interaction? Do you have to win? Do you need to be right? And this was the key for this, is for me for this week, I had to realize that, that it's just the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, I have to be comfortable that I spoke my truth. I may have said that some things that, aren't any of my business, but they're a concern of mine, and I could relate it to, something. But the second part of it is I don't need to know why. A process will go through, and I think that's the hardest part whenever we have change in our lives, because most of the time we have conflict, change ends up happening, or it's leading there, is then to allow that process to happen, So now it's like, okay, I was told not to talk to anybody. Okay, I'm not going to talk to anybody about it. There's going to be a process. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to find out what this was all about in the end.
Right.
And I'm going to have some faith in that process because I've been that guy that just won't let go of stuff. And when the process actually takes its natural course, I start to not feel it. I'm not too proud of how I behaved. I'm not too proud of what I said.
Yeah.
You know, because the process is going to take what it's that time frame is going to take something. And there is no amount of me lying on my back with my hands and my feet in the air, screaming like a little baby that's going, wah. All I'm going to do is feel crappy later. Like, that was real classy. I handled that with grace.
Yeah.
Thumbs up, you know?
Right. And I will say that this article here is really good, especially I found it better for like conflict resolution type feelings, you know, like especially if you've been in a fight with someone, there's some really great, you know, stuff on there for that. But it does pertain to, like Henno was saying, like this concept, because you kind of feel the same way. Like he said, it's still a conflict feeling. Like if you got into a fight with someone, meaning more so of a verbal fight than a physical fight, but you walk away and you start, oh man, I shouldn't have said that, or ooh, I should have said this, or, you know, you start, and a lot of it, and it doesn't even have to be like a spousal fight. It could be at work, you know, kind of a thing too. Mm-hmm. You know, I should have stood up for myself. I should have said this, or in Henno's case, it's, you know, I know this and I probably should have this, or maybe I shouldn't have said this. And, you know, it's a tough situation. You know, maybe if you don't say something, nobody else does. And then something's allowed to sneak underneath, you know, the coverage. So it's, you know, it's best that, like he said, he stuck with the truth, and now you have faith in the process, you know? So,
yeah. The article that you're referring to, this is the one on selfgrowth.com, right? The 5 ways to deal with an emotional hangover?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure, because we have 2 different articles that we're talking with this week. Mm-hmm. Both are very, very good articles, so highly recommend going out and reading them.
Yeah. And there's a decent amount of stuff out there, like if you just Google emotional hangover. You know, the only thing I would warn people of is that a lot of them have more to do with like a drinking hangover than you know, and don't get me wrong, they can parallel, you know, but the stuff that cures a drinking hangover many times, like before I go drink, I you know, or after I drink, if I have a large glass of water, I pop a couple of aspirin, and, you know, whatever, that may prevent my hangover the next day. That's not going to prevent an emotional hangover. Right. You know, if I had taken that Saturday night or Sunday, I wouldn't have felt great on Monday because I drank a bunch of water and took a couple of aspirin. So, you know, make sure you're kind of looking for what you need there.
And I think like the beginning of this article with regard to that is really important because it talks about the feelings that are associated with this. Mm-hmm. And they're a result of, they didn't specifically say it, but most of the time in these situations, we get huge adrenaline boosts.
Yes.
Huge adrenaline. We get a rush like you wouldn't believe. And afterwards, when that's gone, you feel empty.
Yeah.
Very empty. You feel drained. And they talked about it here about the feelings of fatigue.
Yes.
And, you know, that once all the vibrations and, you know, like it says turbocharged, once that goes away, you know, now you're sitting there left, you know, feeling like a rag doll, just like lying there going, oh, wow, you know, and it's at those moments where people will go pick up a drink. Mm-hmm. You know, they'll go grab the quart of ice cream.
Yep. You're looking for something to pick you back up.
Yep, you're looking for your comfort stuff.
Yep.
They tend to make you feel worse the next day.
Yep.
Exactly.
So if you can, I think part of this advice was to get into self-care mode. Mm-hmm. You know, when I feel like this, I realize, okay, wow, this was kind of emotionally draining. I'm going to do nothing for a while. I'm going to make myself something. Once again, I'm going to make some food that serves me. That's going to be, you know, that's going to take care of me for a while. That's not going to leave me regretting it the next day.
Yeah.
And I'm going to plop myself on the couch and watch some bad TV.
Right. That's what I was kind of doing that when we were in Chicago, actually. Like when we went to the Thai place, I was like, you know, most of the food I've ate here, I haven't really got much as far as vegetables. And so I ordered a mostly vegetable dish. The next day on our way home, I got something that had quite a few vegetables. And I started drinking water across the day, you know, both days. And I was already looking forward going, if I don't do this, you know, like this is going to take me a little, you know, once I get home, I'm going to be, fighting this. So I'm just going to try to do it now so I'm not too far out of, where I want to be. So yeah, it's the same idea. I was already going into self-care mode,
Which is great.
Yeah.
Well, I think
great topic.
Yes, and I think we are at that point.
Yeah.
So if you would like to continue the conversation with us, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach me on Twitter at Jen's Crazy Life. At Jen's Crazy Life, and that's GEN, not JEN, just for those out there. You can also reach the podcast at thecrazylifepodcast.weebly.com, or you can reach us by email at thecrazylifepodcast@outlook.com. And Henno, how can they reach you?
Find me on Twitter at IdaHenno, and I just if you do, share your experiences with us. Email the show. We like to hear them. I know it makes a difference. That it's just nice to hear that's like there's a connection being made. So
definitely,
absolutely. And you, Bryan?
You can also if you want to see when the show new episodes go up, you can find us on Twitter at The Crazy Life Pod. You can find me at Stunami on Twitter. You can find my other show at salty_language on Twitter, or at saltylanguage.com. And again, go check the new episode out that's got Henno on it also for lots of good time shenanigans. And also, we're part of the Tangent Bound Network and the Wicked Radio Network. Jeez, been away from this too long. So go check out those networks. There's all sorts of good stuff in there. And also, we've been promoting the Podern Family thing. So if you're looking for new podcasts, check out #PodernFamily on Twitter or Facebook. And, there's all sorts of podcasts that are part of this thing now, trying to just grow the indie podcasting community. And then as always, I would like to remind you, we're not doctors, therapists, trained professionals of any kind, just three people sharing our experiences. If you feel you need help, please go seek professional help. See a doctor, a therapist, whatever, and get all the tools you need for facing whatever fight you have. Don't take what we offer here as therapy or a substitute for therapy. Please don't self-diagnose or self-treat. Again, go see a professional and get a game plan going. And then lastly, if you are feeling suicidal, please don't do anything drastic. Call the suicide prevention hotline. Jeez, I can't get that right. And talk with someone, or, if you can get a friend to take you to the emergency room, or just talk with you so you're not alone, or call 911, tell them you're having a mental health emergency, and they should take care of you. But please don't act on it. If you catch yourself making a plan, make sure you get into therapy, contact someone or whatever, because making a plan is a very significant step towards committing suicide. If you're not already aware of that, making a plan is a very significant step. So if you have the suicidal thoughts, that's very common. If you make a plan, that's a very, very, either way, please go seek help and please don't act on it.
Absolutely. I guess with that, we're going to end the show. And as we've done every week before and will continue to do, everyone keep breathing.